Good morning and welcome to Korea Today, brought to you live from Seoul.
North Korea sends a high-profile special envoy to Beijing ahead of the summit between South Korea and China. Could this be signaling a change in tide?
And Japan has reaffirmed its stance on Korea's wartime sex slave victims. Details coming up in the headlines. And Korea unveils the Suryeon, the first Korean-made helicopter. More on in print.
It's been a long week. I'm sure you could use a good laugh. We'll have that for you on Korea Today.
Controversy continues and remarks from Japanese political leaders regarding its wartime history. The right-wing march moves on. And visit the city of Gyeongju. With only 100 days left to go until the Istanbul-Gyeongju Expo, we tour the city that's rich in traditions and culture with Francois Seikli on Thursday, May 23rd, 2013.
From Arirang News, this is Korea Today.
And good morning. Thank you for joining us on Korea Today. I'm Young Kim.
And I'm Kim Min-jung. Thanks for tuning in. Forbes has released its list of the world's 100 most powerful women in the world. And topping the list was German Chancellor Angela Merkel for the 7th time. And one of the newcomers is a familiar face. She is President Park Geun-hye. She ranked 11th on the list.
That's right. President Park was one of 14 newcomers to the Forbes list of the 100 most influential women. And what's interesting is that Forbes not only concentrated on her story, but they also mentioned that this was her second term at the Cheongwade, as well as
the de facto second term.
Exactly, the de facto second term, and at the same time highlighted her life story, including the death of her mother, as well as the assassination of former President Park Chung-hee.
That's right. And the magazine also mentioned some of the political and economic obstacles that she faces. So we'll keep an eye on that.
All right, it's just one step away from the top 10.
Right. All right, we'll now turn to Na Hyung-kyung for a check on today's headlines.
Japan has reaffirmed that the compensation of Korea's wartime sex slaves was settled in a 1965 agreement between the two countries. In Parliament Wednesday, Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida said historical documents clearly show the issue was fully resolved, while Seoul argues that human rights violations such as sexual slavery were not included in the bilateral pact. Japan's Kyodo News, in the meantime, reports lawmaker Takeo Hiranuma of the right-wing Japan Restoration Party said he thinks wartime sex slaves were prostitutes on warfields. This comes after Osaka Mayor Toru Hashimoto of the same party said earlier this month that sexual slavery was a wartime necessity. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has sent a special envoy to its closest ally, China. On Wednesday, Pyongyang's Vice Marshal Choi Ryong-hae's visit to Beijing is the first made this year by a top North Korean official. It comes ahead of the U.S.-China as well as South Korea-China bilateral summits scheduled for next month.
North Korea wants to take a leading role in ending the deadlock between itself and the international community, mostly by using its ties with China. It wants to indirectly talk with the US and create a mood where Pyongyang can take the reins.
Analysts see Choi's trip as a move by Pyongyang to prevent further isolation and mend ties with Beijing. Eyes are now on whether the month of June will become the turning point for resolving tensions on the Korean peninsula. Korea's first indigenous utility helicopter, the KUH-1, was finally unveiled to the public on Wednesday. The chopper, known by its Korean name Suryeon, was primarily developed by Korea Aerospace Industries as well as the Agency for Defense Development with a bit of foreign support. The Suryeon is a dual-engine chopper with each engine having a capacity of over 1,800 horsepower. It can fly at a speed of up to 272 kilometers per hour and is deemed fit for combat operations. The Korean Army plans to deploy 20 Suryeon helicopters by the end of the year and keep producing 20 units each year. Officials also say they have high hopes for the commercial potential of the new chopper. And the names of more than 200 Koreans suspected of creating paper companies overseas and evading taxes have been obtained by an independent non-profit media organization. On Wednesday, the Korea Center for Investigative Journalism disclosed 5 of the 245 names on the list.
A second batch of names will be announced next Monday. We expect to see some names from the business sector, including those from some of the country's most well-known conglomerates.
Individuals on the first batch include Lee Soo-young, the owner of polysilicon maker OCI, and Lee Young-hak, wife of former Vice President of Korean Air, Cho Jung-gun. The Investigative Journalism Center says most of the people on the list had at least one paper company set up in tax havens such as the British Virgin Islands and the Cook Islands.
Good morning, everyone. We seem to have 3 main stories overlapping on our dailies today. The first being the special envoy that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un sent to China, and the other 2 are related to offshore companies. But the pictorial news of the day is the Suryeon, Korea's first homegrown helicopter you can see here, which was unveiled in a ceremony attended by President Park Geun-hye. There she is holding up a fighting pose in the cockpit of one of the 5 locally built Suryeon choppers. And we'll go ahead and go over to 동아일보 to take a look at the image here. It shows the president being flanked by members of the military. And in fact, the image title reads, Korean-made Suryeon chopper debuts, and President Park sports military garb for the first time. And the caption does note that the operational deployment ceremony does mark Korea's joining of an elite group of 11 countries that produce transport utility choppers. And President Park did give a sharp salute before addressing the audience. And the paper notes that this is the first time since her inauguration that she did don that military garb, and looking quite sharp, if I may say so myself. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at JoongAng Daily. It also has a similar image of the 5 helicopters presented at yesterday's ceremony. It also adds that the country hopes to produce some 200 of these choppers by the year 2020. But we'll leave that there now and head over to this side story right here. The headline reads, Kim Jong-un sends special envoy to China. And China informed South Korea ahead of time. Now, the paper cites an unnamed key government official as saying that Beijing had given Seoul a heads up when there appeared to be impending contact with Pyongyang, also when there appeared to be a special envoy coming and when that special envoy did arrive. Now, Kim Jong-un's special envoy was headed by Choi Yong-hae. As you heard earlier, he is a director of the General Political Bureau. He arrived in Beijing yesterday, greeted by a group of Chinese officials, and the article says that he had a long conversation about regional issues, including the fate of the Kaesong Industrial Complex, over lunch with China's head of the International Department, Wang Chia-rui. It also says that Che brought with him a letter from Kim Jong-un himself, and that sources believe Che will hand-deliver it to Chinese leader Xi Jinping today. At the latest, it adds that the fact that there were a number of high-ranking military officials in the envoy, Che being the highest-ranking among them, the topic of military tension on the Korean peninsula will also be on the agenda. Well, we'll go ahead and leave that there and head back over to 동아일보, actually. In an update to a story we brought you yesterday, 동아일보 has news that prosecutors have imposed overseas travel bans on CJ Group chairman Lee Jae-hyun, as well as his sister and vice chairwoman Lee Mi-kyung, as a full-fledged investigation unfolds on allegations that the company held several overseas accounts that are believed to house slush funds. And in fact, 조선일보 also has a similar story as on its front page as well. It's a little bit different in terms of the numbers. It reads, reads, 3 CJ Group owner siblings forbidden from leaving the country, and that is including younger brother Lee Jae-hwan. According to Joseon-ilbo, he of course leads a CJ affiliate company. Now the article adds that 9 others were also handed travel bans on suspicion of having had a hand in the company's tax evasion. Allegedly, this does come as prosecutors are heating up their probe by summoning 10 individuals, including a team leader in charge of the group's finances. The suspicion now is that CJ Group chairman Lee was intent on transferring his wealth to his heirs by way of paper companies or companies that only exist on paper in countries that have low tax rates. And the article adds that CJ was found to have 7 companies in Hong Kong and that 5 of them shared the same address. CJ Group, meanwhile, maintains that the companies are unrelated to the charges. All right, and finally, we'll scoot on over to Gyeongyang Shinmun. Relatedly, its headline reads, 245 Koreans found to run paper companies in tax haven territories. And among those on that list, as you heard it earlier, includes polysilicon making giant OCI's chairman Lee Soo-young, as well as a wife of former vice president of Korean Airlines, as well as relatives of the 25th largest conglomerate Hyoseong Group. Now, the list was revealed by the nonprofit journalist group, the Korea Center for Investigative Journalism, and the country's tax office has responded by saying that it will look into the report. And that is your look at what's in print on this Thursday. Here comes your market action from Wednesday.
Just a heads up, weather-wise, it's going to be the hottest day this season.
Oh, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's right. It's going to be a hot day, and we're going to get an update on the weather report from Lee, who's joining us from Songdo. Tommy, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'm reporting live not from Seoul but from Songdo, Incheon. So what brought me here today is because Korea will be holding the largest youth event here in Incheon. Now the specific name is the 9th Korean Youth Expo. So I will be going around to check out some of the exhibitions and things that they have on display a little bit later in the latter half. But first, let's talk about the weather. Now, this morning, I don't know if it's apparent through the screen, but it is very foggy this morning here in the areas of Songdo. It is gradually lifting as the sun is rising. However, if you are here in the areas of Songdo, please be cautious if you are on the roads because it is still quite foggy. As for the temperatures in the mornings, it is gradually rising. Currently, the temperatures right now are at about 16 degrees Celsius, so a lot warmer than yesterday. Now, as the day progresses, our highs will get much higher. It'll be very hot. As for around the peninsula, our UV levels will be quite high as well. Standing outside in the sun for about 20 minutes or so can get your skin burned. So all I can say is advise you to cover your skin with some extra sunscreen, maybe with a hat or even some sunglasses as well. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and take a closer look at the temperatures across the nation. Here in the capital, Seoul, our temperatures will jump up to the high 20s at 29. Daejeon, Daegu, and Gwangju will reach outside of the 30s, peaking up to 31 degrees. As for Gangneung, Busan, and Jeju, conditions will look fairly cooler at 23 or 24. Now, as you can see, the difference in temperatures between the daytime and nighttime, they are still quite different. So don't underestimate the chillier mornings and evening conditions. Try to dress accordingly when heading out. Well, that's all I have for the weather now. I'll be back in the latter half to show you around Korea's largest youth event.
The government has stepped in to rescue some 110,000 debtors who fell victim to the Asian financial crisis in the late 1990s. It'll erase bad credit records or relieve companies and individuals from debt.
As you heard in our headlines, Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida says compensation for the former sex slaves has already been settled, but this issue of Japan's past imperialism and its right-wing movement is far from being settled here in Korea and its neighboring countries.
Now, the flurry of controversial remarks that's been ongoing has been creating a situation that's been steadily going from bad to worse. We have the details. 5 years after losing ruling power in parliament, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is back stronger than ever, trying to revive the country's economy with his so-called Abenomics policy. And he has succeeded to some degree in doing so. Recent polls show his support rate is now at over 70%. However, the problem is with the country's upper house election this July. The Conservative Party is trying to gain long-term support by taking on a right-wing policy.
The trend toward conservatism in Japanese community. Current politicians think that would be the best chance to make the trend toward the conservatism and right-wing irreversible.
On April 21st, neighboring countries criticized Japanese officials' visit to the controversial Yasukuni Shrine, but Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe failed to take into consideration these sentiments and instead defended their actions.
Paying respect to those at the shrine is our right, and we have the freedom to not give in to any threats or criticisms.
It went from bad to worse as Abe denied Japanese invasions, and Osaka Mayor Toru Hashimoto claimed there were no forced sex slaves.
It won't be an overstatement to say there's no just standard academically or internationally to determine what is invasion.
Everyone can understand the sex slaves were necessary to provide some comfort and relief to wartime soldiers.
The recent stream of controversial statements have come from members of the Japan Restoration Party.
It originated from something called Japan Restoration Association, which is centered around Hashimoto. New Japan Restoration Party became a kind of a symbol of a strong leadership in Japan. Nationalistic remarks would gather all the Japanese conservative powers under its flag.
Prime Minister Abe's remarks continue, and recently not only has he drawn a comparison between Japan's Yasukuni Shrine and the Arlington Cemetery in the U.S., he has also opted for a photo shoot in a fighter jet number 731, reminding war victims of the military unit that conducted biochemical experiments on humans. The country's foreign minister Fumio Kishida has also stated compensation for sex slave victims has been concluded.
It's horrible and sickening to see and hear false claims while former sex slave survivors are still here. This shows that Japan is truly not regretful for its horrendous past and is not willing to take responsibility for its actions. Instead, it seems like they could start another war by denying the truth.
On May 24th, 2 sex slave survivors are scheduled to meet Osaka Mayor Toru Hashimoto, while the first court trial for Korean laborers who are forced into working at Mitsubishi machinery plants will begin. In the midst of this, UN-affiliated human rights committees have officially asked Japan to stop denying the existence of forced sex slavery and demanded the government to nationally educate its people about the matter.
And to shed some light on this issue, we have a reporter joining us from Japan. She is Ayako Mie from the Japan Times. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, these comments, like Young said, are not sitting well with many people in Korea and China and also in the U.S. But is this a small group of far-right politicians just creating a stir in Japan, or is this a prevailing sentiment over in that country? And so how is the Japanese media reacting to this as well?
Well, let me say that this is not a prevailing concept, and frankly, but I have to say that frankly, such comments are not new in Japan. But Japanese media bashed Osaka Mayor Toru Hashimoto, who doubles as the co-leader of Nippon Isshinokai, so ferociously, like they did before. And the Japanese public is not turned with his attitude either, as Hashimoto's discourse really hurt the sentiment of the Korean people, Okinawans, as well as the dignity of both men and women. And it's demonstrated in the recent poll by Manish Shimbun, I believe, that 75% of the respondents opposed to Hashimoto's comments.
Well, it looks like many are in support of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Apparently, he is receiving a poll rating of over 70%, and that is rather high. Now, this must be due to the economical revival that he's brought on with the Abenomics policies.
Right. You know, even though the Abenomics or Abe's economic measures help the Japanese economy only cosmetically, I would say, it definitely added to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and his Liberal Democratic Party as it braces to seek the election in July. Well, analysts says that his approval rate is high enough to give his party a landslide victory in the election. However, people are very wary if he can really bring any tangible economic benefits, such as more jobs or hikes in wages. Especially now, Japan is likely to raise the consumption tax as early as next April. But Abe is slated to hammer out more growth strategy, so-called, next month. And however, we're yet to see if those measures really bottom out the real Japanese economy in the long run.
Right. Now, Yako, different UN-affiliated committees have advised the Japanese government that it starts teaching its citizens about the forced military sexual slavery that occurred during World War II. Now, how do you think this will play out?
Well, I think, first of all, the LDP, the ruling party, really has to come up with the proposals, and I'm sure there is going to be a lot of controversies. And I'm sure even within the LDP, there are people who are saying that we need to teach the children the right history, including, the comfort women and everything else. So we are yet to see. There's a lot of political dynamics going on within the LDP, and we have to see what's going to happen after the upper house election, I would have to say.
You said 75% of the citizens are opposed to these controversial remarks, especially one made by Osaka mayor. So that's comforting to know. All right, thank you, Ms. Ayako Mie from the Japan Times, for talking with us this morning.
Thank you.
We're going to take a look at some of the issues making headlines on the business front this week. First, we have details on the government's most recent bailout plan for delinquent borrowers from the Asian financial crisis. Take a look.
On May 21st, the Park Geun-hye administration announced it will lift the financial burdens of credit delinquents of small and medium-sized companies that were hit by the Asian financial crisis. This is the second time the government has decided to carry out some trillions of won's worth of debt relief following the National Happiness Fund. Those who fell victim to joint liabilities between 1997 and 2001 are eligible for the write-off.
The Asian financial crisis was one of the country's most detrimental calamities, and although 15 years have passed since then, there are still many people struggling to get back on their feet from the debt they acquired during that period. This measure is to help people relieve themselves of debt and get back on their feet.
Along with roughly 1,000 debtors, more than 110,000 delinquent borrowers who saw their businesses go sour will see their debts of some 13.2 trillion won, or roughly $12 billion, lifted. In addition, with this bailout, close to 1,000 borrowers who had their names and credit histories listed at the Korea Federation of Banks will have their credit histories wiped clean. Also, 70% of their debt will be written off, while the remaining amount can be paid off over the next 10 years at the longest. Many are interested in this latest financial relief announcement, as it is the largest debt rescue yet for delinquent borrowers and poor creditors.
The Asian financial crisis happened a long time ago, and most people had to suffer financial losses and difficulties due to the nation's economic disaster. So, with this new deal, we are hoping to see great results and aid more people in need.
All right, and to tell us more, we have Sejong University's Professor of Economics, Lee Jong-un, joining us in the studio. Thank you very much, Professor, for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so the government has offered a debt relief program following the National Happiness Fund. How are the two programs different?
This credit repair program is more specific in terms of policy purpose and the range it covers, whereas the National Happiness Fund is more general. It didn't specify any crisis or any period. It is just for those who cannot access the formal financial markets. But both are following the keynote of the Park Geun-hye administration, and also for alleviating the bipolarization problem that has been evolving since the 1997 Asian financial crisis.
And this bailout program only is offered to those who suffered from joint liabilities from the Asian financial crisis. Let's backtrack a little bit. Why did so many Korean people default back then?
Actually, lenders have demanded the small businesses submit the third-party debt guarantees when applying loans. But such guarantees can cause a chain of bankruptcies, especially in the wake of financial crisis. And at the time, structural reform was going on with a high interest rate to shrink investment to recover the previous level of foreign reserves. So that's why the insolvency rate in our corporate sector was so high. It rose up to 0.52% in 1997.
So that was in 1997 and 1998. And as we saw in the video, the debt held by those 110,000 individuals who are eligible for the program amounts to more than $12 billion US. Is this program feasible? Wouldn't it take a toll on the country's economy?
First of all, the debt record will be deleted by KEMCO. And secondly, there will be a reduction of principal and interest. And there will be a rescheduling programs. So the applicants are allowed to pay back up to 10 years. So certainly, as you said, there will be a certain amount of fiscal burden on our economy. And moreover, we might have to accept some moral hazard problems to some extent. Even so, I think the positive effects are more than offsetting the negative ones. It's actually for alleviating much heavier burdens, those who cannot steer the economic life in the normal way.
And what a lot of people, I think, will be wondering is why only those affected by the Asian financial crisis. Korea has seen other financial struggles in the early 2000s as well. So why did Park Geun-hye administration target such a specific group?
Actually, the 1997 foreign exchange crisis is a kind of national disaster, national scale crisis, and partly it is a kind of government failure. So we cannot attribute these debt problems to individuals' misjudgments or complacency. So I think this rescue program makes sense.
So back in 1997 and 1998, it was more of the government's plan or failure of their plans for the financial situation for the country. Whereas compared to other maybe crises like the credit card crisis in 2003, that was more triggered by company level. Okay. Well, some, like you mentioned, say that the government might be institutionalizing moral hazard. Is there a way to prevent this from happening?
I think the healthy and happy economic agents are essential for the vigorous economic growth. Actually, without these human resources, economy is nothing. So labor forces free from debt problems are crucial for the future vitality of the Korean economy in the long term. This is what these credit repair programs aims to achieve.
All right, let's move on. Next, we are going to talk about the Korean stock markets, but let's first take a look at this video before we talk more.
Last week, as the New York stock market jumped to record high numbers, the Kospi also saw its numbers go up for 4 straight days and break through the 1990 mark. This was also due to an increase in foreign investments in local shares and ownerships. The Kospi was able to finally gain some stability after its rapid fluctuations caused by the yen depreciation. The fact that the Bank of Japan's quantitative easing and the depreciating yen will likely see some limitations due to the rise in Japanese bond interest rates will also have positive effects. As many agree that the Korean stock market has been overly undervalued, it looks like more foreign investors will continue to purchase domestic shares.
Now, the benchmark Kospi started off the year above the 2000 mark, but lately, for the past 2 months, it's been on a downward trend. But why are some analysts saying that the foreign investors will soon recognize that the Korean stock market is undervalued and prompt them to invest more?
Just about up until a few weeks ago, the foreign investors were attracted to Japanese stocks. It's largely thanks to the huge depreciations of the Japanese yen. But now it's time they start realizing that Korean stocks were undervalued. So that's why they are attracted to the Korean stock markets, because they look more affordable and attractive.
All right, so around when can we expect to see the Kospi climb above the 2000 mark again?
I think apart from these Japanese factors, the recovery of the U.S. economy is a very important spillover effect on the Korean economy. Nowadays in the U.S., the quantitative easing, the early ending is discussed. This is a signal of early recovery too. So U.S. is another factor for our economy.
Of course.
Internally also, Korean brand values are soaring these days, and the government takes tough measures to boost demand. So sooner or later, I think the Kospi index is expected to surpass the 2000 mark.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Professor Lee Jong-un, for joining us. We do appreciate your insight.
It's a great pleasure.
All right, that was Professor Lee Jong-un from Sejong University. Still ahead on Korea Today, with 100 days left for the opening of the Istanbul-Gyeongju World Culture Expo. We visit the historic city of Gyeongju, where the century-old history of the past Silla Kingdom lives and breathes. Stay with us.
Let's get right to it. Danny Cho is joining us. He is a comedian, actor, and writer based in Los Angeles. But this morning, he is joining us right here on Korea Today. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Our producer said you're going to have me roll on the floor laughing, so please make me laugh.
First of all, your producer needs to stop making those requests. But I'll just tell you a little story. When I was 4, my mom was pulled over by the cops for speeding. And my mom can't speak English. She's been living in the States for over 40 years now. She can't speak a word of English. And so the cop, he pulled next to her. And you know how Koreans, they have a Korean sentence and they try to translate it into English?
Right.
So she looked at the police guy and went, "Policeman, please look at me one more time." Right? And I don't know, what are you trying to say? I was 4. 20 years later, it finally registered. It was her trying to say, "한 번만 봐주세요," right? So I called her and I was like, "Mom, really? Really? 한 번만 봐주세요. Look at me one more time. What is wrong with you?" And she's like, "그래서, so what?"
All right. So you use these stereotypes and these races in your jokes, in your shows. Where do you get your inspirations? From your mom, obviously. But do you sometimes get hate mails for doing that?
Oh, I get hate mail every day.
Yeah.
And but you know, I always think if I don't get hate mail, then I feel like I'm not doing right, you know. And I think my inspiration, you know, it's not even stereotypes per se. I feel like when I write a joke about, let's say, Mexican people, right? It's because I grew up in an all-Mexican neighborhood, so you know, I learned the Pledge of Allegiance in Spanish. You know, it was bilingual education, so the teacher would be like, "Mijo, did you do your tarea?" Which is like, "Did you do your homework?" And I'm like, "Sí," you know what I mean? And so my English wasn't that good, you know, it's still not that good, but you know.
But how do you know when you've crossed the line, you go, uh-oh, okay, that didn't go too well?
The thing is, for a stand-up comic, you know, if you worry about how the audience responds, you can't do it. So, you know, like I have to have that judgment where I go, you know, I know I'm good, you know, I know I'm awesome, and so I need to figure out what makes me laugh.
Right, this is your second time to Korea.
Third, actually.
Third time to Korea. And how do you, I'm sure the response that you get from the audience is quite different from the one you get in the U.S. I mean, tell me about that, and also how do you connect with your audiences in different places?
I think, first of all, Korean audience members, especially Korean women audience members, they're the worst audience members for stand-up comedy, because they But you don't want that. You don't want this mouth covering stuff. You want like ha 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 laughter. But and I'm like, oh, you can't.
How am I doing so far?
Terrible. But no, but I think you're doing great. But I think it's the again, I'm not trying to. If I worry about their reaction, then I'm just gonna stress out about it. So I give them me. In my mind, I feel like I give them a piece of me every time I'm on stage. And so if they don't like it, well, they paid money to see me. So
I'm sure there are moments when you feel down, and you're a human being, and you're a funny human being. But how do you deal with just having to turn it on just like that on stage?
What I do is I try to get in a better mood. And so I'll go online and I'll watch people fall. Those people just fall videos. It's like fat people falling is funny. Skinny people falling is not that funny. But when fat people fall, it's funny. So I just go type in fat people falling, and just for 10 minutes just watch and be like.
Okay, I can imagine some fat people watching just not happy with that comment.
Well, then film it and fall. You're gonna get 1 million hits. I swear.
All right, well, tell me about the project, the K-Town Cowboys. What inspired you to come up with this show?
Well, the webisode series, the partner in my company, Daniel Park, he's a director. Every time I see like an Asian American project or something like that, I was like, they really didn't capture my story or my friends' stories. And so, thinking about how we partied and how we hung out, and so it was a slow year, and I said, you know what, the end of 2012, 2009, let's film it. And see what we can do. And so, it was a very, very small budget, and we shot a webisode series. And I called all our people that we know, from other comedians that are more established, like Bobby Lee, to actors and actresses, and they all came through.
Right, you've been in this industry for 7 or 8 years now. What is stand-up comedy to you?
Stand-up comedy to me is therapy. It's stress relief. I get paid to talk about my problems, you know what I mean, but in trying to do it in a funny way. So, from relationship problems, I have a girl that I'm dating, and she's beautiful. She, if you're watching, you're beautiful. She has the face of an angel. The one that betrayed God, the devil. And so, and I talk about our, that kind of stuff to just stresses about, people and who I deal with, so.
Okay, tell us about your future plans, just briefly, we're almost out of time.
Future plans, we're doing K-Town Cowboys, a feature film. We're launching, there's a lot of people attached to it I can't name because I'm legally bound to not name names, but they're famous. And then it's gonna be a fun project with, it's gonna be an actual movie, and we're trying to get into theaters. And then I have a stand-up comedy tour that I'm always doing, so, yeah.
All right, good luck to you, and it was a great pleasure and funny talking with you this morning.
You're lying. You're so lying to me. You're fake laughing. I don't like this.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Inside, I'm really laughing very hard. All right, going after win number 5 on the year. Lee Hyun-jin threw 7 1/3 innings against the Milwaukee Brewers, allowing 2 runs on 6 hits and 2 walks while striking out 4. And of course, he did get the win as the Dodgers won 9-2. In the process, Lee Hyun-jin lowering his ERA to 3.30 on the season. Also, Choo Shin-soo 1 for 5 on the day, including a double against the New York Mets this morning. His average drops to an even 300 on the season. His Reds beat the Mets 7-4. And over in Japan, Lee Dae-ho was 0 for 4, going hitless for a second straight game. His Oryx Buffaloes beat Chunichi 6-3. Lee Dae-ho's average now drops to 325 on the season. In Korean baseball, Samsung Lions were going after a 5th straight win against the LG Twins once again, although, well, the Twins' Anthony Riz had something to say about that as he was taking the mound up against Chang Won-sun in a battle of the two teams' aces, and Lee Byung-gyu singles up the middle in the first as LG takes a 2-0 lead. Lee Byung-gyu would have hit 3 for 4 in the game, a pair of ribbies, raising his average to 316. LG up 6-1 in the 7th. Moon Sun-jae cranks one to left. That's his first homer of the year as he would go 3 for 5 in the game. And then Riz, solid game in his part as he would strike out Shim Young-chul to end the game. Complete Game 3 hitter for Riz as the Twins hand Samsung just their second loss in 14 games. That gave Nexon a chance to take first with a win, but in the first is the Bears who would score first. Hong Sung-hun with a single to right as that would drive in a run. Tucson up 1-0, but the Heroes would rally in the 6th. Kang Jung-ho singles to left. That drives in a run as the Heroes take a 3-1 lead. Kang with 3 hits in the game, and then 2 batters later, Oh Yoon would single up the middle. He would go 2 for 3 in the game and give Nexon a 5-1 lead. Nexon rallied for 5 in the inning as they doubled the Bears 8-4. NC at SK Dinos get a Jurassic hit from Jo Young-hoon. That's his first homer of the year. It's a 2-run shot as NC takes the early lead. Now, Lee Ho-jun has 7 home runs on the year. Make it number 8. He leads off the 3rd with a long ball to put NC up 4-1 with the solo shot. Now, NC hasn't been known for their defense this year, but hey, check out Kwon Hee-dong in left, going flat out to make the catch. You know, Man of Steel doesn't open for another 3 weeks, but Kwon Hee-dong looking like Superman on that play. It was a very important play as well as NC go on to the victory. Hanwha at Kia, Yoon Suk-min struggling in his last outing. Kim Tae-won makes him struggle some more. Double to left center, scoring Choi Jin-hang. Kim Tae-gyun, no, he's DOA. In the 3rd, runners on the corners and Yoon Suk-min box. Now that allows both runners to advance, including Han Sang-hoon, who scores on the play. Hanwha go on to win this one 3-1. Yoon Suk-min drops to 1-2 on the season, not having the best year despite him becoming a free agent next year. A lot of people saying that he could be the next Ri Hyun-jin moving on to the majors, but we'll have to see. He's going to have to improve those numbers this year. To soccer, Seoul advanced to the AFC quarterfinals this week, but for Korea's 2nd team in the knockout stage, it would be a tougher road. Jeonbuk suffered a 2-0 loss at home to Japan against Kashiwa Reysol last week, meaning they would need at least a 3-goal victory on the road to advance. Could they do it? Let's go see what happened. Jeonbuk would actually get on the board first as Tetsuya Matsushima put one into his own goal in the 22nd minute. Kashiwa would even it up just before the half, though, as Horway Wagner finds Hirofumi Watanabe in the 43rd. Wagner would score a goal of his own in the 50th, as that would be the go-ahead marker before the two sides would trade goals. Later, giving Kashiwa the 3-2 victory. Now, that translates to a 5-2 aggregate win, so Jeonbuk is out of the AFC Champions League, and that means Seoul is Korea's only team in the quarterfinals. Well, winning isn't everything. It's the only thing, said legendary football coach Vince Lombardi, and clearly that is the attitude of coaches in most every sport. Choi Jin-han wasn't satisfied with the number of wins that he was getting out of his boys with Gyeongnam FC and has decided to step down as their head coach. Gyeongnam is coming off a 2-0 loss to Seongnam this past weekend. They had just earned their 2nd win of the season the previous week over winless Daegu. Now, Gyeongnam is currently 11th out of 14 K-League Classic teams this year. The KBL is trying to do their part of what I guess you could perhaps call a form of ping-pong diplomacy. Korea's top basketball league is trying to organize an exhibition tournament for August with the hopes of having a North Korean team participate. With inter-Korean relations tumbling in recent years, the KBL is hoping to push a different button in North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who is known to be an avid basketball fan. Despite international tension since the North's change in leadership, Kim Jong-un took the time to have the Harlem Globetrotters visit North Korea along with one of his childhood idols, Dennis Rodman. Well, we'll see if they do indeed decide to send a team to this South Korean tournament or not. That is your look at sports. Remember to eat healthy and get some exercise today.
Thank you, Jason. The country's biggest youth expo is underway in Songdo, Incheon, and the youth of Korea today, our Lee-dami, is there.
That's right. It's a 3-day expo, and it begins today. Tommy, okay. Well, it is a exposition that's going to, I guess, show the different exhibits that show things for the youth of Korea and also around the world. So we're going to try to get to that. But we
just in time for the coming of age day that happened.
Exactly.
Just a
that was
couple of
Monday,
days
right?
ago. Right.
All right. We'll go over to Lee-dami right now. Tommy, over to you.
Thanks, guys. I'm reporting live from Songdo, Incheon, where Korea's largest youth event called the 9th Korean Youth Expo, which is taking place here. Now, it is starting today, May 23rd, and it will go on for a total of 3 days. Now, what makes this expo, or this year's expo, special and more meaningful is that the youth planning team helped out from beginning to end, whether it be from planning to marketing. And here at the expo, we have one of the students at the youth planning team with us. So let's go ahead and take some time to talk to him. 안녕하세요. Good morning. So can you tell us more about the Korean Youth Expo?
The Korean Youth Expo is going the 9th year, and the teenagers from Korea directly participate in the expo. And many booths are prepared for the expo. Jazz, Nanta, musical performance are prepared.
All right, well, it sounds really exciting, but can you also tell us about the youth planning group as well?
Youth planning group is comprised of 20 teenagers from throughout the country. We directly manage the program, and we are going to manage the program for 3 days. Also, we had promoted the expo by SNS. As a member of planning group, I'm looking forward to see you in Expo. I'm sure you can have a pleasure time in Expo.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a lot of fun. I hope a lot of people come too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so like you heard, there's a lot of hands-on experience programs that you can see. So if you have the time, then you should come on over to the 9th Korean Youth Expo and just enjoy yourselves and have some fun. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do now. So there's this rock wall that caught my eye, and what I'm gonna do, that's why I was holding this helmet earlier. I'm gonna go ahead and climb up the wall. I'll see everyone tomorrow. I'm Lee-dami, Korea Today. 네. 네. 오케이. 한번 보여주세요. 어떻게? Okay. Okay. All right.
Don't come back to us. Just when we wanted to get some action from Dami.
The youth of Korea today.
That's right.
That's right. She's at the Korean Youth Expo, which runs for 3 days. And thank you, Tommy, for that report. And I
We're
believe
going from one expo to another. This is like expo hopping. Right?
Exactly. You interviewed a Turkish TV crew that came for this expo that we're going to talk about.
That's right. The Istanbul-Gyeongju World Culture Expo that will kick off on August 31st. And a lot of people are paying attention to this as it will celebrate the history of the 1,000 history of Istanbul and its ties with Gyeongju. But actually, you shouldn't be talking to me. You should be talking to Francois Sekli because you were there at the expo, right?
I did. That's right. I visited the site. And if you're looking to find out a little bit more about the Istanbul-Gyeongju World Culture Expo 2013, you can get a bit of a sneak peek at the Gyeongju World Culture Expo as well. So it opened in March, and there's already been about 110,000 visitors that have gone there. And so let's head on down there with no delay and see what it's all about. The start of the Gyeongju World Culture Expo dates back to 1998, and since has been the only culture exposition in the country to show off Korea's history and culture to the world. Dubbed as the museum without a roof, Gyeongju features various UNESCO-designated cultural relics such as the Bulguksa and Sokguram. That's why this city, which breathes the 1,000-year history of the Silla Kingdom, attracts many tourists with its beauties.
The Istanbul-Gyeongju World Culture Expo 2013 will start on August 31st and continue until September 22nd, as we believe that the start of East-West culture collaboration started with Istanbul and Gyeongju. We're hoping this exhibition will follow the footsteps of the historic Silk Road to create further cultural partnerships.
So right now I'm in Gyeongju, which is a beautiful city that is filled with rich history. And lately Gyeongju has been receiving a lot of international attention, and I'm here to find out why that is. The land of the Gyeongju World Culture Expo is the 82-meter Gyeongju Tower, resembling the iconic 9-story Hwangmyeongsa wooden pagoda. It awes many visitors with its grand scale and unique architecture. Not only that, some 4,500 fossils are displayed at the Fossil Museum, which is the biggest in Korea. Children especially love it here as they're able to learn history and let their imaginations roam free. This 3D Experience Center offers traditional tales and many other fun things to enjoy. The Korean traditional musical, Mizo to Silla, The Land of Gods, is one of the most popular venues for tourists. Visitors also have a chance to try out spectacular and fancy traditional Silla costumes and can pretend they're Korea's first female queen, Seondok.
It's a really amazing experience for me, and yeah, it's really fantastic, I think.
Handpicked young elite warriors called Hwarang were known for their bravery and courage. And by trying these Hwarang outfits, you can almost feel the warrior's strong spirit and valor that successfully united the three ancient Korean kingdoms some 1,000 years ago. So what I'm wearing right now is called a Hwarang, which is what the warriors from the Silla Dynasty used to wear. Now, what I'm also about to do is go into a performance related to that time period. I can't wait to check it out. From Silla Kingdom's mystery start to its spectacular 1,000-year history and the Queen Seondok's heartwarming love story, the Korean classical musical features traditional dances and music to emphasize the kingdom's grand history.
We will successfully reach our goal of showing the Turkish people not only the culture of the Silla Kingdom, but also introducing the Korean culture as a whole.
The spectators can enjoy the great opportunity of learning the Korean drum dance, Ogumu, from the musical performers at the show. As Ogumu is widely loved for its dynamic moves and refreshing drum beats, it's a wonderful chance for tourists to experience Korea's traditional spirit in music. Well, I just tried some traditional drums for the first time, and that was an amazing experience. Now, my experience with percussions would be a drum set, and this is a whole different ballgame. And what's really great about this is that it's just a really nice release of energy. Besides the Ogumu experience, there are many other various programs for visitors to see and learn about Korean culture and tradition. This is another great experience to try out, making Korean traditional paper, hanji, with paper made from mulberry. By seeing everything from start to finish, tourists are able to understand the importance of nature and the wisdom of Korean ancestors. Families with children especially love this as they're able to make various hanji items like paper fans and hand mirrors with the hanji. So right now I've just made my first box here, which is made with hanji, and it was a really interesting process to actually see the way that was made. I had no idea it was done that way, and it seemed very natural. And just putting this together in a nice quiet environment is just really relaxing too.
Because it's called an expo, we thought it would be a bit formal and boring, but there's so much to see and enjoy. I think this is great since we're able to see more traditional materials at this festival in this rich historical city of Gyeongju.
So wait no further and head on over to the Gyeongju World Culture Expo to experience Korea's beautiful and historical city, rich with the 1,000-year history of the great Silla Kingdom.
it's not a dull expo. It's a really exciting expo with lots to do and see.
Yeah, I mean, well, not only is there a lot to see, but there's a lot of hands-on experience, I think, which is very valuable. You know, I went to this event, I got to try to learn some b-boy moves, I got to try some drums, I got to...
You got to make that little box, too.
That's right. So I think for that reason, I think a lot of people will enjoy this event. So.
So the expo that's going to take place, you said from August 31st, right? It runs until September 22nd, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I believe
and
so.
There are going to be Korea-Turkey Orchestra performing, friendly soccer matches, as well as K-pop shows. So a lot to see, definitely.
I'm interested in that soccer match, actually.
Yeah, and they're actually expecting about 50 countries to participate, and 15 of which will be European countries, and 18 of which will be from Asia. So I like to make my way down there myself if I happen to have the time. So.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm sure some of our viewers will find that interesting as well. The the Istanbul-Gyeongju World Culture Expo 2013. Thank you for that report.
Thank you
very much.
D-100 until the expo begins. So start counting now, and that's all we have prepared for you this morning.
All right, we'll see you back here on Friday morning at 7 a.m.
Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.